legends, today we are still going to be dealing with the fallout of the UFC signing with Paramount, specifically addressing the questions that Dana was asked at his post-fight press conference for the first episode of Season 9 of Dana White's Contender Series. There are two big issues here that I wanted to bring up. Number one, Dana White weaseling his way out of answering what's going to be happening with fighter pay. And number two, Dana White laughing at the mere idea that fight cards could be watered down simply because the Paramount is going to say simply because ESPN, simply because Paramount is paying them so much money. I mean, guys, what do you think I am? You think I'm going to start watering down the cards? I would never do that to you guys. Never. Yeah, we're going to be looking at the last few years of cards compared to how they were before we went into the ESPN deal. It's going to be a damn good time. Let's get right into it, boys, with big old Boldy himself, shall we? Right, the first thing that I wanted to look at was Dana White and the watering down of MMA cards. Let's have a look.
We're going to go in with to this Paramount deal, guns a-blazing, and no, that's not the way I think. I don't go, let's...
Dana White doesn't think that way. Dana White would never water down a card, guys. Continue, Dana.
Down now, we don't have to... Exact opposite.
Nice. Last one for me, I did want to ask...
Now... since ESPN has acquired the distribution rights to the UFC, would you say that the quality of pay-per-views has gone down or has gone up? I mean, ESPN came into the UFC world and started prepaying for pay-per-views at 400,000 plus pay-per-view buys as a baseline in 2019. Now, I haven't been watching the sport for, forever. I started watching when Conor McGregor knocked out Jose Aldo. But I can definitely notice that there was a time in the Reebok era when we were still on sports where we were getting stacked fight night cards, sometimes with, 3 title fights on there at once. UFC 217 stands out in my mind as one of them. UFC 217 had Michael Bisping versus George St. Pierre on it, Cody Garbrandt versus TJ Dillashaw. Had Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Rose Namajunas on it as well. Where UFC 317 International Fight Week. What did UFC 317 have? We just had that. How many title fights are on UFC 317? There was Topuria versus Oliveira. That's right. What else was on UFC 317? Alexandre Pantoja versus Kai Kara-France. Brandon Royval versus Joshua Van, who has just come into the UFC. Beneil Dariush versus Renato Moicano, two absolute old heads. Peyton Talbot versus Felipe Lima was on the main event of that card. In fact, it was the pre-2019 era when we were in the double champ era, wasn't it? It was UFC 226 in 2018, a year before we went over to ESPN's deal with pay-per-view. This was also obviously before we had the Apex, right? And look, the Apex did save everyone and saved all of sports entertainment during, early 2020 when the big lie was going on, but we started getting people back into crowded arenas in February of 2021. We've since then had Apex cards, and my god, I'm not going to make this video about going through some of the most memorable Apex cards that we've ever had, but even just taking out the pay-per-views, the quality of the fight night cards has absolutely gone down. So this idea of Dana White being like, guys, what? You think I would start watering down the cards just because I'm getting paid for it? If you had a graph that showed the amount of prepaid buys that the UFC was getting, you could almost correlate that perfectly with another line showing the quality of the cards. So yes, Dana, that's exactly the sort of thing that you would do because it's the sort of thing you've been doing, brother. Moving on, next we're going to be looking at Dana White dodging a question about fighter pay. I think Dana White might try and run for president one day because the dude is learning how to answer questions politically so nicely here.
To be pay-per-view partners with you, right? Now what's the carrot or the encouragement to be the superstar?
It's not math.
Question was about what is the encouragement for fighters to go out and sell the fights now that they're no longer getting pay-per-view points.
Massive restructuring, we got a bunch of smart kids over there that work in the accounting department to figure out how to make all this stuff work. But it's.
Yeah, but guys, don't even worry about that. There's a bunch of dudes. They'll figure out how to make it work. Don't even worry about fighter pay.
So good for the fighters, and what I loved about being with one company that made such a big investment in us is they're all in with us. So the fighters are going to get
Pay? The word we're looking for is pay, Dana. The fighters are gonna get, don't fucking say they're gonna get paid.
Tons of promotion, built by all these different unbelievable networks that these guys own. And, these are aggressive, smart guys that are going to build a big media company.
Yeah.
They're going to build a big media. So, Dana, how are the fighter pay going to get affected? There's going to be some kids that are going to figure that out. And, man, am I going to promote the fuck out of these fighters. Oh, man. We're going to build the biggest media company. Paramount's being built. UFC's built. What do you mean they're going to build a big media? It's being built. They're paying you for the product. The fighters are the product. Oh, man, this is going to... They're going to get so much promotion. This is an opportunity, not a job. It's an opportunity. Complete deflection from Dana White. Heaven forbid he says the word fighter pay.
Do you know what the cards
And we move on. He's asked about fighter pay again a little bit later on. A few minutes later, he gets pushed about fighter pay, and we'll listen to his answer here.
I'm not going to have any comments on that yet because we still got to get together and figure this stuff out. It's August.
Very complicated, Dana.
To figure all that stuff, but
yeah, so much time.
The low-hanging fruit that's easy to answer. Bonuses are obviously going up. So
bonuses are going up. I'll tell you that. 50K, kid. How would you like 51K? Ha! Bonuses are going up. It's going to be great. They haven't gone up since inflation has started spiking. Ever since 80% of the money supply got printed under the first Donald Trump administration. Anyway, bonuses are going up. About bloody time, mate.
That'll be big. And just forget about the tide rising with all the other fighters. I mean, just the number.
Forget about the fighters. Don't worry about the fighters. Forget about the fighters. They're going to be getting bonuses. Don't worry about the fighters.
What the bonuses bring to a fighter is, that's what millions of dollars.
Yeah. Maybe for Justin Gaethje. Maybe Justin's made $1 million in bonuses. And that's it. That's Dana White's deflection of fighter pay. It's funny how he talks about, we got real smart kids out the back. They're gonna figure all this stuff out. I don't know if you guys know this about me. This isn't my full-time job. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the views and the subscriptions on this channel. This isn't my full-time job. I'm a drywaller. Well, this drywaller sat down on his bucket of drywall at his lunch break while he was eating his ham and cheese toasty and used the power of Gronk to fix fighter pay in about 10 minutes. Yeah, I'm not kidding. I came up with a system that would fix fighter pay. I mean, I didn't come up with it. All you have to do is go to an AI, type in the right prompts, and it'll tell you how to fix fighter pay, Dana. Now, I'm going to show you guys my system for it real quickly. I'm not going to get deep into the maths for it because, quite frankly, fighter pay is a little bit boring to talk about. But I'm just going to show you how simply this problem is fixed if you really wanted to fix it. Right, I started off with a very simple system. What we want to do is we want to be able to pay the fighters in the rankings, and we want to incentivize the fighters to get people to actually watch the fights. I figured that an average NFL game gets about 17.5 million views, so I figured 4 million views averaged amongst the fighters. Like if a fighter averages 4 million views as a high watermark, that's a pretty good level to aim to. I figured that it's the fighters that are ranked that should be getting paid out of this fighter salary cap that we're going to get out of the $1.1 billion that Paramount is paying the UFC. And I thought, you know what, the guys that aren't ranked yet, they still deserve to be on 50 for 50, 80 for 80, 100 for 100. They deserve that shit. So they're getting left that little bit of money, and the women's MMA fighters, they deserve to get paid a different level compared to the men because, the men get more views on them. They're worth more. That's just the way sport works. I'm sorry. It is what it is. I figured it's $1.1 billion. Let's just take 10% of the money that Paramount is paying the UFC and create a fighter salary pool. By the time you take out the money for the rest of the 650 athletes that aren't ranked and the money for women's MMA, I was left with about $910 million. And I wanted a system that was set up for fighters 15 to 10 to get one level of pay, fighters 9 to 6 to get another level of pay, fighters 5 to 1 to get a certain level of pay, and then the champion to get more pay based on the amount of views. How many views do they get while people are watching their fights? And, well, Gronk and I came up with the system to work out pretty bloody well. In fact, you could take You could take a very simple scenario and say a champion fights a 5th ranked fighter and it gets 500,000 views. How much does each fighter get? Well, the champion would get $3.2 million and the 5th ranked fighter would get $2 million. And the way that this system is set up, it guarantees that the champion is always earning more, but it incentivizes the fighters to get as many people watching their fights as possible. Now, if this is on a streaming service, it is very easy to see how many people are on the streaming service watching the fight while the fight is happening. In fact, it's even easier to run those numbers back after the event is done to see when the viewership peaks. So you could literally re-sign the contracts to make it work as a paid per view to the fighters. This would encourage the fighters to start wanting to get people to watch their fights. The more people that watch their fights and the higher ranked they are, the more that they get paid. Now, if this system was implemented, you would have to be fucking ruthless with the rankings. Ruthless with the rankings. Because quite frankly, I look at this system like a bit of a Pandora's box. I really do. I hate the idea of a fighter getting this much money in there. A 5th ranked fighter getting $2 million. I hate it. I hate it. Imagine if Colby Covington had got $2 million every single time that he had fought Kamaru Usman. Well, every single time that Colby had fought for a title, and Colby Covington's sitting on $6 million plus already the gambling sponsorships that he gets for his kick streams. He'd fight even less than he does now. You would have to be ruthless with the rankings. If you are not in the rankings actively fighting, you are not eligible to be in the rankings and you're booted from it and your contract changes accordingly. But this way, you could actually fix fighter pay. So the idea of like, we need a whole bunch of smart kids figuring out how this all works, not really, Dana. Not really. I mean, AI has been given to us. You can figure out a way to understand a system. Here's a quick salary to confirm. Here's a quick salary to confirm. You could just simply tell AI what you need out of your fighters. You want fighters fighting often, and you want fighters drawing viewership to the platform. Pay them based on how many viewers they get. But of course, Dana White wouldn't dare ask Gronk his opinion on it or an AI on it because Dana White doesn't want to fix the fighter pay, does he?
You know, the fighters are going to get tons of promotion.
So the fighters are going to get just tons of promotion, man. Tons of promotion. Look, if we want to be one of the biggest sports in the world, I understand you got to start paying these fighters, more. But also, these fighters, when they get paid more, they don't fight, and their job is to fight. Their job is to fight. There is a middle ground here where you could end up paying the fighters the sort of system that I have proposed, where even ranked fighters are going to be getting very good money. And you just have to be ruthless with them. You have to cut them often. Now, here's the hard part for the UFC. It has to start being a fucking promotion company again. Because if you're cutting ranked fighters often for inactivity, that means you need to promote new young fighters coming up the rankings. But that means you have to be actively promoting them. And the way that the UFC promotes people now is that, well, you know who Colby Covington is. He's been in the rankings for 100 years. He's been a main event. You know who Brian Ortega is. He's been in the rankings for 100 years. He's been a main event. You know who Paulo Costa is. He fought for a title nearly 10 years ago. He's been in main events 3 times. Being in a main event promotes itself by the fact that the cameras are simply pointed at the main event. If they were churning through fighters at the top of the rankings, then they would constantly be having to introduce new fighters to the audience, and therefore the UFC would have to start to try more. Now, the UFC could do that. Now, they've got $1.1 billion to spend on each to spend a year. You could have a salary cap set up for just the fighter salaries, and if they don't hit that average 4 million views, you could use the residual money left in the fighter salary cap to even pay for promoting new, young, up-and-coming fighters that are going into the rankings. But of course, that would require effort, and the UFC aren't about that anymore. But don't worry, just because they're getting paid so much money now from Paramount doesn't mean they're going to be watering down the cards. We had the super fight era when they had to start selling pay-per-views. And then the moment that ESPN started paying for pay-per-views, the super fight era sort of just died out, didn't it? Don't worry, the UFC would never water down the cards, guys. Shamil the Blob Gazia versus Rosenstrike coming to you at an Apex card soon. Numbered event next time. But anyway, that's Dana White ducking and weaving the fighter pay question while an idiot on a plaster bucket sorts it out in about 10 minutes. If this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Dougie, and I make MMA. My name is Dougie, and I make an MMA video every day of the week. And I go live at least 3 or 4 times a week. I go live as often as I can, which turns out to be every single day. If you want to join me for any of these live streams, or you want to know when a video drops, you just hit that subscription button down there, or that notification bell. If you want me to run through my little fighter pay thing that I came up with, that Gronk came up with, that I sat and typed prompts into, we could talk about it on the live streams. If you like the video, like the video. What do you think the quality of the cards is going to be like now? Is the past an indicator of the future? Or do you think Dana White's really going to buckle down and get to work, especially since he's going to be running boxing as well as Power Slap and the UFC? I'm sure he's really going to buckle down. Let me know about it down there in the comments. And if you're one of the legends of the channel, always commenting, liking the videos, donating in the live streams, buying memberships, gifting memberships, your names are up on the next slide, as well as something new. The Dougie's Corner leaderboard. Who are the best pickers in the Dougie's Corner community? We have a Tapology group, and it's starting to get bloody intense, mate. Welcome to the Dougie's Top 10 rankings. That's new on the end of the slide as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.